Hello, everybody. We are back again on another Friday. It's Edmentum, Illinois Presents. And today I'm here with my colleague, Meredith Whittick, and we are very, very pleased and honored to have PJ Caposey with us. He's the superintendent of schools in Meridian District 223 here in Illinois. But you probably also know him on Twitter. You know that he's a published author. You know that he's a TEDx speaker. But what you may not know is that he's also a Chicago Bears fan. So I'm actually wearing my Bears gear today. So PJ, any thoughts? We had a big day yesterday for the Bears, new GM, new head coach introduced. Any thoughts?
Hope, I would guess, would be the easiest one, right? Like every Sunday, my wife asks me during the football season, why do you do this to yourself? So hopefully I don't have to do this to myself in the future. But it's interesting because, you know, you're in 15 group chats with buddies that all have different thoughts. And the head coach is very football-y, which is going to be awesome for sound bites if we're good, and it's going to be very easy to trash them if we're not. But I think anyone that pretends like they know whether this is going to be successful or not just doesn't, right? Like I can't imagine that Bill Belichick won the press conference 20 years ago as he was a retread coach from Cleveland. So I think we just don't know, but I'm full of hope. And I really like the GM. He just seems really smart and engaging, someone that I'd like to work for or with. It seems like he'd be successful as a leader in any organization. So I'm rooting for him and hopeful. And I'm not going to be one of the people that listen to the radio stations and call in condemning the hires because they didn't get the guy they want. I don't think any of us know. So just hopeful.
Yeah, hopeful. And I agree with you that my wife is also hopeful that they'll be good. So then that way we can actually enjoy watching a game on Sundays next season.
Yes.
PJ, now you and Meredith and I were talking a little bit before we hit the record button here, just about, you know, kind of where we're at in education right now. And one of the big things that people are talking about and thinking about, and you'll see it on Twitter, you'll see articles written about it, is just this idea of teacher stress. And we know that the teacher shortage is also, again, a thing. So you know, what are your thoughts, just as this is rolling around in your head, just about this idea of teacher stress, you know, in this as the pandemic continues?
So for me, I think the first thing is to acknowledge it's real, right? Like it might not, however, be as real as social media makes it out to be. Just meaning from my conversations with my staff and from other teachers, there are some people that feel exactly like the rhetoric on social media is going to be, but then there's also people that are like, you know what, we're okay. This is hard. It's really hard. And we want you to know that it's hard, but we're okay. And so I think that message kind of gets lost a little bit. But I also think the message of the teacher shortage, like, should be a societal, like, sounding alarm. Like, this is a big deal. Wall Street Journal, which is, you know, obviously not a typical liberal leaning publication, had a really detailed, in-depth article about the shortage and just about the trends within the shortage. So we all know the shortage exists, and we all know that there's the great resignation taking place in lots of places right now. And all of those, according to the Wall Street Journal's data, education is outpacing literally every other industry. So when we already had a shortage, when we don't have people in the pipeline, and we have people resigning at a pace that's outside of every other industry, like, this is going to become a societal issue. Like, I would imagine this is a sounding board for statewide and federal elections the next cycle that rolls around. And I think we should be relatively alarmed at this point in trying to figure out ways to solve this growing problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Makes me think sometimes maybe I need to go back in the classroom. Hey, at least one of my kids is a teacher, so that's good. I feel like I'm still contributing somewhat. So what are some of the things that you are seeing administrators do that are helping to maybe curtail some of the stress or the burnout that teachers are going through?
So what was interesting for me is that I get a pretty decent viewpoint of engaging with teachers and then also engaging with principals, not only in my own district, but I lead some cohorts and I teach some programs and whatever else. And so this is what I could tell you from the principal side and the administrator side. And I know we're on the dark side, but from our side is that I don't know a single, and I mean this sincerely, a single administrator that doesn't acknowledge how hard the last 22, 23, 24 months have been on our teachers. and that aren't trying new things or different things in order to make it less stressful. Correspondingly, I talk to many teachers who tell me that either what is being tried is unsuccessful and at worst condescending, and in many cases is ill-informed. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not appreciative or don't notice, but there's some things that it just seems like we're having two completely separate conversations around the same topic instead of actually engaging in the conversation together. And I will tell you, even from my district, like we've obviously conversed with our association quite a bit, but in terms of getting down into the quote rank and file, I haven't done a great job of doing that because I've assumed what we're doing has been productive. And the feedback I've gotten now that I've started to solicit more at the rank and file, some of the things we've done that were absolute no-brainers that took no thought were things that they appreciate the most. And some of the things that we tried really hard on and, you know, storyboarded out and all that stuff, they didn't care at all about, and it may have come off completely wrong. So I think that there's just a conversation that needs to occur. The thing that stood out the most to me in my conversations with teachers were two things that like felt like they slapped me in the face. Number one, the talk of self-care is actually detrimental. Meaning this is that every adult knows they need to take care of themselves, was what they told me. And if we're not taking care of ourselves, it's because we can't right now. And throwing it in our face over and again is almost demeaning, not encouraging. And if we continue to talk about self-care, but don't give time, it comes off as hypocritical. So that was this huge, like, red flag sounding alarm to me. The second thing was this, is that the internal struggle and dynamics in the teacher groups is interesting, particularly when, because there's this sub shortage, right? So a lot of teachers, if you're going to have to miss a day, that means that we're going to have to pull from a teacher out of their prep period. And so there's this enormous guilt and pressure that is happening within teacher ranks that they're not going to take a sick day. They're not going to take their kid to, you know, whatever appointment is, whatever, because they don't want one of their colleagues to miss out on their prep period because they know how stressed out their colleagues already are. So like, to me, it was one of those like aha moments of, wow, like we have to protect those prep periods and not put our teachers in a position where they're battling against each other. So that was one of the things that came back to us as really positive. We hired permanent subs for every building this year. Just we had additional subs at the beginning. And that to me was just a thing we did, right? Like it wasn't a well thought out plan or collaborated or whatever. And that came back as like, we were so thankful you did that, which again, is just one of those things where we've put a lot of thought into a lot of things that they told us were not effective. And that was one of the things that came back to us. Like that was great because it took some of the pressure off because we know someone's going to be here if we can't be.
Yeah, not only that, but then you have somebody permanently in the building who's getting to know the students and the teachers and the culture, and they just become more ingrained in that as well. So I think that's wonderful that you guys did that. Can you give another example of, you said there were just a couple of the things that were just simple that you threw out there that the teachers really appreciated versus those big things that, you know, thought, hey, we're going to try this really, you know, cool thing. So what was something simple that the teachers like just really appreciated?
So we've kind of made it a habit of walking at the bell on Friday, which just acknowledges, hey, you've worked hard all week. The contract says you have to be here till 3:15, but it's 2:35 as soon as the kids are out, get out. And we've got really thoughtful principals that have been pretty good at stuffing things in people's windshield wipers, little thank you notes and whatever. And like those things that cost no money, right? It's just a matter of, and I see you, right? Like I know you're working hard. I know you're going to do what it takes to get the job done. So if you want to walk at the bell on Friday to go, you know, self-care or go grab a beer, whatever it is for you, do it. Just little simple things like that again, don't cost us anything. And we're again, just that's an email, right? That's just an email that I can send out or a principal can send out. Those are the things that our staff acknowledge that, hey, we know you see us. Even if that's not the thing, like even if they don't necessarily appreciate the time or it's too little or whatever, it's just the ability that they know that they're being seen. One other thing which kind of blew my mind, which I left off in the first one, which this to me is what I said, like, don't believe everything you hear on social media, is we've tried to strip down some initiatives, right? Like, because that's what you hear, our plates are so full. And so I heard back from some of our teachers that we solicited and we asked them to use their own political capital in order to help us push initiatives through pre-pandemic. and then watching those initiatives die because we're pulling them off the plate was more painful than adding something to the plate or keeping it on. So again, it's one of those things where we're having the conversation, but we're having it in two separate rooms. And sometimes having the conversation together, I think would make this just simpler in a lot of places. So I think acknowledging that the stress exists, I think acknowledging that the stress may not be in aggregate as bad as it seems on social media, acknowledging that principals are trying and administration is trying, but we might not be doing the right things. There might be simpler, more productive things that might cost no money, might cost money, that we could be doing better.
Nice. Do you have any advice for next steps in helping folks try to get this conversation more parallel?
So to me, it's the assume-aside, right? Like that's what, when I looked back and tried to figure out what we did wrong, right? Like, so I didn't want to celebrate the victories too much, but I wanted to figure out what we did wrong, was that it was when we projected either our fatigue or emotions or what we thought was happening onto our staff, as opposed to just asking them. And I mean that sincerely, just literally asking them. So we were going to adopt new ELA curricular resources and change our approach from kind of balanced literacy to science of reading at the K-5. And we were ready for it. And then we met earlier this year and I'm like, you know what, I don't think this is the year to do it, right? Like, I don't think we should, this is a massive overhaul shift, PD for years. This is the big thing, maybe we shouldn't do it. We went to the K-5 staff and it was almost unanimous. No, let's do this, we need to go, right? So if we would have just assumed and tried to take that off the plate, it would have been absolutely the wrong decision. Now, I believe in some of our other buildings, if I would have said, hey, we're going to roll out this massive thing, I would have, been bludgeoned, right? Like, so, but I think that people are operating, and this might be, Pollyanna, but I believe people are operating with the best of intentions on both sides. But I think that there's just not enough conversation and not enough simply asking, hey, this is where we're going to go. Should we hold off a year or are we ready to push through? And let people tell you, as opposed to, again, playing the guessing game and assuming what people need.
It all comes back to dialogue, relationships, making sure that people know that you want to talk with them. You want to know what they know.
Yeah. And I think that the strain on relationships, so this is something I say a lot when I speak, with increased stress breeds decrease of empathy. Meaning that when I'm in my own stuff, when the community's yelling at me about masks and the board's on me about whatever, I have a really hard time putting myself in your emotional position. It's just really hard. And quite literally, there's neuroscience that supports this, right? Like when your stress levels, it's firing in a different part of the brain that decreases your ability to be empathetic toward others. And so we're all kind of in the fight right now. And so if we are able to pull ourselves out of that for a minute, get out of our emotional state, bring down our cortisol levels and think rationally, it's very easy to put ourselves in the other person's shoes and then start having a conversation and dialogue. But right now, I think everyone's so much in their own space, it becomes very hard to want to engage or be willing to engage. And when you're engaged, to actually, listen to understand in order to help move us forward. So I think there's a path forward. I think the path forward is easy. It's just really hard to do. I should say the path forward is easy. The path forward is simple. It's just hard to do when our stress levels have been so high and so consistently high now for 2 years.
Well, PJ, I always learn so much when we meet with you. So thank you for being with us this morning. And again, for everybody, PJ Caposey, Superintendent for Meridian 223. I highly recommend following PJ on Twitter. He's just full of lots of knowledge and really get you thinking a lot. So thank you for being with us, and we look forward to the next time we talk to you.
Awesome. Thanks for the opportunity, guys. Go Bears.